Good evening, wanderer of stories. Tonight, we drift back nearly 2,000 years to the shadowed corridors of Rome's Colosseum, where the dawn's chill and the roar of caged beasts set the stage for a day of brutal spectacle, and where the unseen sweepers labored to keep the sands pristine for emperors and mobs alike. Find a comfortable spot, allow your shoulders to soften, and let the steady rhythm of your breath guide you towards stillness. While you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy my work. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what hour glows on your clock. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. As the world outside your window eases into darkness, imagine yourself stepping through a narrow archway into the vast arena, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and iron. You wake up on a straw pallet shoved against the damp stone wall of a cramped underground cell beneath Rome's grandest monument to spectacle and slaughter. A draft snakes along the floor, icy as a dagger, slithering over your exposed toes. The first sound you hear is the rumble of carts rolling over cobblestones above, a prelude to the day's carnage. You squint up at the faint glow, spilling through a grated window high in the curved wall. It's dawn, but you'd barely call this weak. Grey light. Morning. It's more like the city's gods are reluctant to illuminate what's about to happen. Your blanket is a single, lice-infested scrap of wool that smells of mildew and desperation. Every time you shift, it releases a puff of stale, sour air, the scent of countless nights spent shivering in Roman winters. Even in the heart of the empire, the cold shows no mercy. You wrench yourself upright, joints popping like amphorae dropped on marble, and your breath emerges in ragged white clouds. You know the Colosseum sand needs sweeping before the first events. If you can call them that, begin. Gladiators, criminals, exotic animals, all scheduled to die for the day's entertainment. And you? You're the man who makes sure the blood doesn't pool too thickly. Historians still argue whether sweepers like you were enslaved or merely desperate freemen, but either way, your role earns the same scorn from the patricians in their fur-lined seats. A door creaks overhead, footsteps echoing down the spiral stairs. Your overseer appears, lantern casting cruel shadows across his narrow, pockmarked face. His cloak is thick, his boots oiled leather, but he offers you no warmth. He doesn't need to. His authority is enough to keep you moving. His voice, when it rasps out your name, sounds like two stones grinding together. You'd recognize that tone anywhere, demanding, impatient, and utterly devoid of sympathy. You slip into your tunic, once white, now the brown-grey of trampled ash. It's thin, torn at the seams, offering less protection than a wet leaf. Each morning starts with this same ritual, cursing your existence while you struggle to lace your sandals with numb fingers. The leather thongs bite your cracked skin, each tug a reminder of your poverty. Once dressed, you haul yourself out of the dark cell into the maze of tunnels beneath the Colosseum, the Hypogeum. A subterranean world more terrifying than any nightmare. The air smells of rusted iron, rotting straw, and something else. Something sweet and coppery you know too well. Old blood. The sand above waits to be raked, freshened up so the crowds can marvel at clean white grains turning crimson by noon. You shamble up a ramp carved into the stone, emerging at last into the arena proper, where the icy breath of dawn greets you like a slap. You stand under the colossal arches that have already begun funneling in murmurs of anticipation from the streets beyond. The Colosseum itself towers overhead like a hungry beast. Its tiers of marble seats curve around you, cold and silent at this hour, but even empty, they radiate menace. You feel the weight of thousands of eyes that will soon return to those seats, eyes eager for you to vanish so they can focus on the day's slaughter. Every stone under your feet is polished smooth by the passage of countless victims, human and otherwise. You swear you can almost see the ghosts of yesterday's fighters in the drifting mist, their outlines flickering at the corners of your vision. You pull your broom, little more than a bundle of twigs lashed to a wooden pole, from the storage alcove. Its handle is dark with old blood, the bristles stiff with gore. One good fact to start your day. Rome's Colosseum could seat 0 people, a number as absurd as your hope of ever escaping this life. A quirky tidbit you picked up from an older sweeper. The Romans sometimes flooded the arena for mock sea battles. Yes, they turned your workplace into a shallow ocean when boredom struck. As you begin sweeping, you already feel the cold leaching into your bones, seeping up from the sand itself. Each pass of your broom sends puffs of pink-tinged dust curling into the air, glinting faintly in the first rays of sunlight slicing through the eastern arches. The silence is broken only by your breathing and the occasional clank of cages opening far below, an ominous promise of what the day holds. You pace across the sand, boots crunching softly, moving carefully around spots where yesterday's entertainments left deep gouges in the earth. You find a tooth, kicked free during a brutal bout, and toss it into a leather sack already half full of bone shards and arrowheads. You know the overseer will check your bag later. A careless sweeper who leaves such grisly souvenirs risks a beating. Your mind drifts as you work. You imagine a world where you might have been born the son of a senator, waking in a warm bed to a steaming bath and a breakfast of figs and honey. Instead, your breakfast will be a crust of stale bread if you're lucky, washed down with watered wine that tastes like regret. The sun crawls higher, painting the arena in cold gold. It gleams on the spearheads lining the walls, on the darkened stains that no amount of sand can hide, and on the distant silhouette of the emperor's box, a luxury balcony from which your life's misery looks like a well-orchestrated show. You pause for a moment to stretch your back, muscles already burning, and watch your breath curl away into the morning air. You know better than to hope for mercy from the day ahead. After all, it's not even breakfast yet. You bend back to your task, broom creaking as you push clumps of blood-darkened sand across the arena floor. The overseer stalks the perimeter like a jackal, his boots crunching with each step. You can feel his gaze pinning you in place even when your eyes are on the sand. His whip hangs coiled at his side, a silent threat that stings louder than words. The overseer's cloak, dyed a deep indigo, flutters in the early breeze. A luxury of colour only the powerful can afford. You know that colour. You've seen it spattered with blood before. You pray you don't see it again today. His voice barks out your name, and you flinch as though slapped. You straighten, spine screaming in protest, and offer a muttered reply. He demands more speed, less idleness, and makes it clear that if you fall behind, you'll find yourself working in the tunnels, where the stench of rotting animals never leaves your nose. You'd rather face the cold air and the whip than that suffocating darkness. One mainstream fact crosses your mind to distract you from his tirade. The Colosseum's events often lasted entire days, with dozens of individual spectacles scheduled to entertain the restless Roman masses. Each required the arena to look pristine between acts. Pristine meaning clear enough for blood to shine bright on white sand. That's your job, to make sure every drop of violence pops against the pale earth for the emperor's amusement. A quirky tidbit you remember from a drunken conversation with another sweeper. Some days, if the emperor wanted to appear merciful, the games would feature staged pardons. Criminals might be spared at the last moment, but the overseers never showed mercy to the sweepers. Historians still argue whether these acts of clemency were truly spontaneous or carefully planned propaganda. Your overseer is a man sculpted from contempt. His face is a craggy landscape of old scars, his eyes pale and glinting with the satisfaction of someone who enjoys their power. His favourite pastime, it seems, is inventing new insults and sharing them with his cronies. When he's bored, he tests the sweepers' reflexes by tossing pebbles at their heads, roaring with laughter if you flinch too slowly. You and the others hunch under his scrutiny like cattle sensing the butcher's knife. Every command is barked, every mistake punished. He orders you to scrape congealed blood from the crevices between the wooden trapdoors where caged animals will spring up to surprise the crowd. Each groove is slick with the aftermath of yesterday's entertainment, and your hands cramp as you work. You imagine the overseer smiling behind you, his breath fogging in the morning chill, content to watch you suffer. As you move to the next section, you catch a glimpse of other sweepers, eyes hollow with exhaustion. One is a boy no older than 12, his hands purple from the cold, his broom bigger than his thin frame. Another is an old man whose stooped back makes him look like a question mark. You exchange brief, darkly amused glances, because what else can you do? Laughter, even bitter, is the last defense you have. Every so often you hear the distant roar of a lion waking in its cage. The sound cuts through the stillness, a low, resonant growl that rumbles under your feet. It reminds you that you're not the most expendable thing in the Colosseum today. A single slip from the overseer's patience could see you tossed in as a warm-up act. Your overseer waves a hand, signaling you to move faster. You grit your teeth and sweep harder, sweat prickling your forehead despite the cold. You have to keep up. You have to keep moving. You have to stay invisible, because invisible men don't get dragged into the hypogeum for punishment. Your broom catches on something half buried in the sand, a bronze ring, probably torn from a gladiator's armor. You hesitate, fingers brushing the cold metal. The overseer's eyes narrow, and you know he sees your pause as insolence. You pocket the ring quickly, hoping to barter it later for a scrap of meat or a better place to sleep. Your heart hammers as you do it, but the overseer doesn't call you out. This time, another roar from the cages below shakes the sand, and you jump. The overseer's smirk widens. He loves seeing you afraid. He thrives on it. He circles closer, breathing words so cold you feel them crystallize in the air. Hurry up, or he'll leave you to feed the tigers. You believe him. Everyone does. You've seen sweepers vanish without a trace. The sun creeps higher, washing the arena in pale light. It glints off the overseer's polished dagger, tucked into his belt, a quiet promise that there are worse things than the whip. The overseer barks a new command, sending you scurrying to the far end of the arena where shadows cling like old cobwebs. As you sweep, you dream of slipping behind the overseer and pushing him into the pit, but you know better. In Rome, there's always someone watching, always another pair of eyes waiting to drag you down for your insolence. So you bow your head, breathe the cold air thick with the scent of blood, and push your broom through sand that remembers every drop spilled. The sun climbs steadily, bleaching the stone walls of the Colosseum, a harsh white that makes your eyes ache. By now the arena is no longer empty. Animal handlers prowl the edges, testing cage locks. Gladiators stretch in groups, their muscles tense and eyes hard, and fellow sweepers move like ghosts across the sand. The smell, already thick with morning dew and stale straw, begins to turn rank as the first wave of animals are led into holding pens beneath the floor. You catch the gamey tang of big cats pacing in darkness, the sour musk of terrified deer destined to be torn apart for the crowd's amusement. You sweep faster, broom rasping over sand sticky with old gore. Each step releases a puff of reddish dust that clings to your clothes and hair. You duck your head as a handler passes with a snarling bear, its claws wrapped in chains. The bear's breath steams like a blacksmith's bellows, and its eyes gleam with fear and fury. The handler smirks at you, a silent reminder of your place in this pecking order. Historians still argue whether sweepers like you received any form of hazard pay, but the consensus seems to be that Rome's sympathy for the lowly was as thin as your tunic. As you slog forward, the stench becomes an almost physical wall. It's not just blood, it's rotting meat from old fights, clumps of animal fur, and the acrid sting of waste. You pass a trench dug for runoff, where filth pools until it's carried away by carts bound for the Tiber. Flies buzz in dense clouds, crawling over your face when you can't spare a hand to swat them. Your mouth tastes of metal, and your stomach knots, but you don't dare gag. The overseer's eyes are always somewhere, and weakness invites punishment. You pause to rest your arms for a moment, leaning on the broom, when a thought crosses your mind. The Colosseum's famed velarium, a massive awning that shaded the crowd, could cover nearly a third of the arena. Imagine the manpower needed to operate it, the ropes and pulleys thicker than your wrist, dozens of sailors tugging in unison. A fringe fact you overheard once: those sailors were recruited from the Roman navy because of their expertise with sails. You chuckle darkly. Rome always finds a way to bend men into tools. The sand drags at your boots with each step, as if the arena itself wants to swallow you. Bertha the ox, your personal metaphor for a stubborn life, would be preferable to this, you think, recalling stories of ploughmen in colder provinces. At least the ploughman's dirt didn't reek of fresh intestines. A sudden shout makes you jump. A gladiator has begun practicing his sword strikes, each swing punctuated by a guttural roar. You skirt a wide path around him, careful not to catch his eye. You know he's likely as miserable as you, yet his rage could spill onto you at any moment. That's the unspoken law here. Violence belongs to everyone, and every day is a fresh lottery. The air grows warmer with the climbing sun, intensifying the smell. Somewhere, an overseer tips a bucket of water onto a stubborn bloodstain, the liquid turning pink and seeping into the sand before disappearing. You hurry to sweep over it, spreading the wetness thinly so it dries faster. The overseer watches with a thin smile. Historians still debate whether overseer's authority came directly from the emperor or from local arena managers who wielded power like pocket-sized tyrants. Either way, their pleasure lies in seeing you sweat. You slip on a slick patch of old bile, barely catching yourself. Your broom clatters. Nearby, another sweeper snorts with bitter amusement, then coughs until his shoulders shake. You force a grin, eyes watering. It's the only joke you'll get today. You find yourself in the shadow of the Emperor's box. Its gilded rails glint in the sunlight, the purple banners stirring in the morning breeze. You sweep carefully here. These sands are the focal point of every gaze, and blemishes are unacceptable. As you bend low, you wonder if anyone important will sit there today. Senators, visiting dignitaries, people whose breath won't fog in the cold, people who have never swept a drop of blood in their lives. The morning passes in a blur of back-breaking labor. You rake clotted lumps, dodge piles of fresh manure from paraded animals, and gather splintered spear shafts. Your muscles burn as if molten lead runs through them, your hands blistered and raw. The scent of damp earth mixes with the coppery tang of the sand, sticking to your skin like a second, filthier layer. Above, the pale sky has begun to harden into a brilliant, merciless blue. A pair of crows circles overhead, their calls slicing through the muffled grunts and shouts below. They know what's coming. They always do. They'll be feasting on leftovers tonight, picking at what the cats, dogs, and rats leave behind. As you scrape the final section of the arena floor, you hear the rattling gates below as they are unlocked, each clang reverberating through your bones. You look up at the empty seats and imagine the day's crowds filing in, their feet beating a steady rhythm of excitement and bloodlust into the marble. And you realize you're nearly done, for now. Breakfast, thin and unsatisfying, waits somewhere in the tunnels. But first, you lift your broom one more time, sweeping the last line of filth from the sand, knowing that no matter how perfectly you prepare it, it will soon be painted red again. The gates groan open wider now, their hinges shrieking like tortured souls. You glance over your shoulder, shoulders slumping with the knowledge that your short window of quiet is gone. Handlers shuffle lions and leopards into holding cages hidden just below the trapdoors. Each beast rattles its bars in primal panic. The air pulses with a low, throaty growl that vibrates through your chest. You sweep faster, but exhaustion weighs on your limbs like iron shackles. Suddenly, you feel a hand on your shoulder. You jerk upright to find another sweeper, a thin, rat-faced man named Lucius, grinning at you with yellowed teeth. "You missed a spot," he whispers hoarsely. His finger points at a crusted smear of blood beneath the Emperor's box. You glare, but he just cackles, a sound more cough than laugh. Moments like this are the closest thing you have to camaraderie, dark humour shared under the watchful eyes of overseers. It's either laugh or weep, and tears only make the sand stick worse. You move to fix your mistake, broom rasping, when Lucius leans closer. "Guess what?" he hisses. "They're bringing in giraffes today." Your eyes widen. Giraffes? You've only heard of them in travellers' tales. Long-necked, awkward giants that look like gods had a laugh one afternoon. Historians still argue whether giraffes were executed for entertainment or just paraded around for novelty, Lucius adds, his grin fading as he contemplates the inevitable mess. The caged animals below bellow and roar, a bestial chorus that shakes dust from the stone walls. High above, distant horns blare as the first crowds trickle into the stands. The murmur of their chatter swells with each passing minute. The atmosphere is alive with anticipation, prickling your skin even as you desperately try to finish your sweeping before the opening ceremonies. Over by the western arches, you spot another sweeper slumped behind a column, clutching a piece of stale bread scavenged from yesterday's scraps. He gnaws it like a rat, eyes darting to the overseer as he eats. You wish you had something to eat yourself, but your stomach is an empty pit, sour with hunger and fear. Between sweeps, you and Lucius lean on your brooms and trade morbid jokes. Who will die first today? Which animal's guts will reach the stands? How much blood will it take to slip a senator off his seat? A frigid gust cuts across the arena, stirring sand into tiny whirlwinds. The crows from earlier have settled on the highest arches, black shapes against the pale sky. Their eyes glint like beads of onyx as they watch you. You imagine they know your name, know the smell of your sweat, know they'll soon feast on what's left when the spectacle ends. A mainstream fact drifts through your tired mind. The Colosseum was inaugurated in 80 AD by Emperor Titus with 100 days of games, a marathon of death and pageantry. But here, now, your world has shrunk to a single day, a single hour, a single moment spent praying your back doesn't give out before the final sweep. Nearby, the overseer's boot heels click rhythmically on stone. His shadow passes over you like a thundercloud. He pauses, scans the arena, and spits a wad of phlegm into the sand. He smirks when you instinctively sweep it away. The overseer's power is a fact of life, a permanent weight pressing on your ribs. Lucius whispers, "Remember, his favorite punishment is to send you down below with the hungry animals." You nod, throat dry, because you've seen what happens when a sweeper stumbles too close to the bars. In a rare, fragile lull, you and Lucius collapse against a stone column just out of sight. You share a ragged laugh over the idea of starting your own arena show, the Great Sweeper Games, where senators compete at raking bloody sand for a loaf of bread. You both wheeze at the thought of plump, perfumed aristocrats struggling to lift a broom. It's a dangerous fantasy, but it keeps you sane. The sun now blazes overhead, baking the white sand into a blinding glare. The arena is nearly full. The crowd's buzz has risen to a constant hum. Criers march the perimeter, announcing the day's schedule in sonorous voices, promising unseen beasts from distant lands and bloodier battles than ever before. You hunch lower, broom moving mechanically, each stroke more painful than the last. You pause long enough to pick at the calluses on your palms, the blisters cracked and weeping. The sand you sweep holds every tear, every drop of blood, every whispered joke, every desperate prayer. It is a silent witness to lives like yours, lives that will never be remembered in marble inscriptions or heroic songs. As the overseer bellows final orders, you and Lucius share one last glance. He gives you a crooked, toothless smile. You grip your broom like a talisman, sweep your last patch of arena floor until it gleams under the pitiless sun, and know that in moments the screams of men and beasts will replace the quiet, and the sand will turn red once more. The gate's thunder closed behind the last handler, and the overseer raises his arm high, signalling that the sweepers are to withdraw from the arena floor. You and Lucius shuffle backward in a ragged line, brooms dragging behind like fallen standards of a lost army. The stands above have filled with a restless sea of faces. Thousands of Romans peer down at you, eager for the day's violence. A hush falls, thick as wet wool, as priests in saffron robes begin their opening chants. The words echo in the arches, rising and falling in solemn cadence, while incense curls into the cold blue sky. As you reach the tunnels, you risk a final glance behind. The white sand gleams under the noon sun, pristine for now, a perfect stage for the terror about to unfold. Your work has made the deaths to come more spectacular, more palatable to the eyes of patricians lounging with cups of watered wine. The thought sits in your chest like a stone. You duck into the shadowed corridors, breathing hard as the overseer's voice fades into the chorus of the crowd. You stumble into a cramped chamber beneath the stands where the sweepers huddle on crates and cracked benches. It's dark, damp, and reeks of old blood and mould. Here, you might scavenge a few mouthfuls of stale barley bread, or chew a strip of dried goat meat if luck smiles upon you. More often you sit empty-handed, stomach rumbling loud enough to join the chorus of lions' roars drifting from deeper tunnels. One mainstream fact flickers in your mind to keep you grounded. The Colosseum could host up to 80, 0 spectators at maximum capacity, a fact that does nothing to comfort you when you think of how many eyes are eager for the sand to be stained again. A quirky tidbit you learned from an old sweeper comes back, too. In rare times of famine, The emperor might distribute free bread to the masses during games, bread you and your fellow sweepers never saw. Historians still argue whether the sweeper's labor was recognized with any payment at all, or whether you lived entirely at the mercy of leftover scraps tossed your way. But whether you were technically a slave or a desperate free man, the truth is the same. Your life is worth less than the beasts you help display. Outside, trumpets blare, shattering the brief quiet of your refuge. You hear the crowd erupt in a roar, voices rising in a tidal wave of excitement that rolls through the stone. The first gladiators stride into the arena above, metal glinting as they raise their swords to the emperor's box. The chants of "Habet! Habet!" thunder overhead. Dust sifts from the ceiling as 0 feet stomp in unison, hungry for blood. You know the next hours will mean endless tasks, sweeping between fights, scraping gore from trapdoors, hauling fresh sand into place. Your muscles feel like knotted ropes, each breath ragged. You lean your head against the cold stone wall, the vibrations of the crowd rattling your teeth. In the flickering torchlight, the other sweepers look like ghosts, faces hollow, eyes ringed with purple shadows. Lucius mutters a dark joke about saving time by throwing sweepers in with the condemned, but no one laughs this time. The fear is too close, too thick. From a nearby grate, you watch through narrow slits as the first gladiators engage in brutal choreography. A man falls, blood spurting high as he lands on the pristine sand you so carefully prepared. The crowd howls approval. The overseer's whip cracks somewhere beyond your vision. Even now, he enforces order on the sweepers scrambling in the shadows, pushing carts of fresh sand, hauling bodies off stage when the moment comes. You close your eyes briefly, searching for anything in your mind that could resemble peace. But the shrieks of animals and the roar of the crowd swamp every thought. The air down here feels thicker than water, each inhale tasting of fear and iron. A low horn sounds from the arena, signaling the end of the first match, and you know what that means. You'll be back on the sand soon, sweeping warm blood before it clots. Your hands twitch around your broom, splinters biting your palms. You stand with the others, ready to run at the overseer's next shout. You hear the shuffling of your companion's sandals in the dirt, the hushed prayers, the soft sob of the boy with the oversized broom. The torchlight flickers, painting shadows of bent, weary men onto the walls, shadows that look like an endless procession of the damned. And so you wait, exhausted but alert, knowing the day is far from over. Above, the emperor raises his hand, and the crowd falls silent, ready for the next act. Down here, your world is dark and cold, punctuated by the overseer's orders and the thunder of a crowd that never sees you. You grip your broom tight, feet planted in the chill earth, and steel yourself for another round. Because in the Colosseum, the sand must always look clean, no matter how much blood you must sweep to make it so. Suddenly, you wake before dawn in Osaka Castle, tucked between thick futon layers that do little to block the cold drafts seeping through the massive stone walls. Your breath fogs in the dim light of an oil lamp guttering low by your bedside. Each flicker of flame makes the shadows dance across heavy timber beams overhead, painting scenes of battles not yet fought. Outside, the night is reluctant to give way. The sky remains a dark, bruised purple, while crows caw ominously from the ramparts. The castle has been restless for days. Servants move through the corridors with urgent steps, samurai whisper at corners, and every hour a messenger arrives breathless, eyes wild. Rumors swirl like autumn leaves in a storm. Tokugawa Ieyasu's forces are gathering beyond the hills, their numbers vast, their intentions certain. You know the truth in your bones. A storm is coming, and Osaka Castle, towering over the city like a stubborn mountain, is both shield and prison. Your father's old katana lies beside your bedding, blade recently oiled, its scabbard worn from generations of desperate grips. You run a hand over it, wondering if you'll soon draw it in earnest. A mainstream fact you overheard yesterday. Tokugawa's armies boast over 150, 0 men, an unimaginable tide of ashigaru and samurai bristling with spears, bows, and the new power of matchlock guns. It's said they move like an iron river, unstoppable and patient. A fringe rumor creeps back into your mind, told to you by a stable hand who claimed he'd seen it himself. Floating barrels of explosives, carried downriver under cover of night to breach Osaka's walls from beneath. Historians still argue whether such sabotage was myth or reality, but the thought alone makes you shiver beneath your thin robe. You slip out of bed, feet touching icy tatami. The castle corridors are hushed, every footstep a crack in the quiet. The smell of last night's cooking fire lingers in the air, mingling with faint traces of sweat and fear. Sliding doors creak as you push them open to the outer courtyard, where a thin layer of frost crunches under your straw sandals. Lanterns hang from wooden posts, their light spilling across armoured figures already awake, tightening breastplates, checking arrows, murmuring silent prayers to ancestors long dead. A squire passes you, balancing a stack of conical Jingasa helmets. His eyes are wide, dark circles etched deep into pale skin. He gives you a brief nod before vanishing into the labyrinth of walls and watchtowers. Overhead, the first blush of sunrise creeps across the sky, illuminating Osaka's towering keeps in a ghostly glow. A bell tolls once, deep, sonorous, rolling across rooftops like thunder. You flinch. Everyone flinches. The signal carries wordless meaning. Scouts have sighted movement beyond the hills. You hurry up a stone stairway, breath billowing in the morning air. At the top, you lean on the battlements and gaze east. Beyond the moat, across rice paddies hardened by winter, you see them, dark shapes shifting beneath the forest's edge. Standards bearing the Tokugawa triple hollyhock crest ripple in the dawn wind, pale against the dark armor of tens of thousands. Fires burn in their camps, dots of orange licking at the sky, while distant horns sound their eerie call. Beside you, an old retainer mutters that these fields once fed the castle with rice enough to survive a year. Now they'll feed only crows. His words sink into your bones as you imagine the siege that awaits. Starvation, fire, and the unrelenting pressure of an enemy that refuses to break. As the sun finally rises, a brittle, merciless light reveals the vastness of Tokugawa's host. You watch rank upon rank of Ashigaru file into place, their armor catching the morning glow like the glint of wet stones. Smoke drifts from their cooking fires, and you think with bitter irony how close they seem, yet how impossible it feels to face them. Below, castle gates shudder open and close as messengers ride in and out, hooves clattering on frozen earth. Drummers begin a steady beat, a slow, pulsing thrum that rattles your chest. The castle stirs to life. Archers string longbows with stiff, practiced hands. Spear walls form in the courtyards. Horsemen adjust saddles and feed restless mounts. You catch the faint, metallic smell of fresh forged naginata blades being distributed to foot soldiers. The clang of hammers and the hiss of quenched steel echo through the keep. Women carry baskets of rice balls wrapped in bamboo leaves, handing them out to soldiers who swallow them in silence, their eyes fixed on the walls as if trying to see through stone. In the distance, war horns answer each other across the fields like angry gods. You duck instinctively, feeling the vibration through your feet. The old retainer beside you chuckles dryly, saying even the horns sound hungrier than the men. It's only dawn, but the day already feels endless, like time itself has thickened into a cold syrup. You grip the battlements so hard your knuckles ache, the stone freezing beneath your palms. The air smells sharper now, as if laced with the promise of fire and blood. You force yourself to breathe slowly, to find stillness amid the tension rippling through every soldier, every servant, every soul within Osaka's towering walls. The dawn light creeps across the tiled roofs, setting them aglow like scales of a sleeping dragon. And you realize with a clarity that cuts deeper than fear, that when the sun sets again, Osaka Castle will never be the same. A sudden crack splits the morning silence, louder than thunder, sharper than a sword strike. You flinch, instinct driving you low behind the battlements. A second report follows, then a third, rolling across the rice fields like an angry storm. Smoke billows from Tokugawa's forward lines as the first cannons belch fire, their stone balls arcing toward Osaka's mighty walls. You hear the shriek of projectiles slicing the cold air moments before they crash into stone with a gut-deep boom that shakes the parapets beneath your feet. Splinters of rock explode in deadly shards. Dust chokes your lungs as you crawl along the rampart, eyes stinging, ears ringing. Behind you, retainers shout warnings. One man screams as a chunk of wall collapses beside him, the debris swallowing his cry. Historians still argue whether Tokugawa's cannons were imported from Europe or crafted by local smiths desperate to match foreign power. You only know they feel like the end of the world every time they speak. You rise to your knees, heart hammering, and peer through the acrid smoke. Shapes move along the far ridge. Ranks of ashigaru pushing more cannon into place, samurai banners fluttering high above them. Between cannon blasts, you catch the rhythmic pop of matchlock fire, a rattling staccato as Tokugawa gunners test their range on the outer walls. A mainstream fact grips your thoughts like a vice. By 1615, matchlock firearms had become standard in samurai armies, a devastating evolution from bows that forever changed the face of warfare. Yet your hands still clutch a wooden bow, strung tight, but feeling as ancient as a child's toy. You scuttle back along the rampart, joining a knot of archers huddled behind a cracked stone merlon. Their eyes are wide, arrows trembling on bowstrings as they wait for the signal to loose. Below, the outer moat churns with panicked fish, fleeing the shockwaves of cannonballs crashing into water, their silver scales flashing briefly in the morning sun. Beside you, a soldier in a saffron houri murmurs a prayer, voice lost beneath the roar of another cannonade. His face is streaked with sweat and soot. His eyes reflect the fires building across the fields where Tokugawa troops advance, their armor catching dawnlight like black waves rolling closer with each minute. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind even as your breath shudders. Some samurai believed the smell of gunpowder was a sign of the gods' displeasure, a superstition that did little to slow the spread of firearms across Japan. You wonder whether the gods are angry now, or simply bored. Shouts rise from the northern walls. You crawl over, eyes burning with grit, to see defenders slamming heavy wooden doors shut behind the first breaches. Flaming arrows hiss overhead, fired by enemy archers seeking to ignite Osaka's rooftops. You dodge instinctively as one arrow clatters onto the stone beside you, sparks leaping before it dies in a wisp of smoke. Down in the courtyard, samurai rush to reinforce weak points. They drag carts of sandbags to crumbling sections, brace doors with thick beams, and herd terrified civilians into the castle's inner keep. A retainer bellows orders from horseback, his voice hoarse, as horses rear in panic at the percussion of cannons. The air has become a swirling cauldron of smoke, screams, and the smell of scorched wood. Yet through the chaos, you find yourself moving almost calmly, muscle memory guiding your steps as you help another sweeper drag a fresh crate of arrows up to the archers above. Every breath tastes of ash. Every heartbeat thuds like a drum in your ears. As you set down the crate, a cannonball slams into the gate tower nearby, showering you in dust and slivers of wood. The ground heaves under your feet, and you stagger, slamming into a wall as debris rains around you. You taste blood where you bit your tongue, but you're alive, still breathing, still moving. Somewhere behind you, the old retainer you met at dawn howls in pain, pinned beneath a fallen beam. You rush toward him, but the overseer's men pull you back, dragging you behind a barricade as another cannon roars and the tower finishes collapsing in a thunderous avalanche of stone and splinters. The man's cry cuts off, replaced by the hiss of fresh fires starting among shattered timbers. As the sun climbs higher, its warmth feels mocking on your skin. Osaka's walls still stand, but they bleed now, cracked and smoking, marred with black scars. The Tokugawa lines creep closer, musket fire punctuating the air with sharp, cracking reports that sound like bones snapping in a fistfight. In the brief lulls between salvos, you hear the distant chanting of monks inside the castle, their voices thin but unwavering, rising above the din like a fragile thread of hope. You wipe grime from your face and draw a shaky breath. The overseer's whistle pierces the chaos, signaling the next task. You rise, hands trembling, and sprint along the rampart to where men shout for reinforcements. Every step is a prayer you won't die in the next volley. The ground beneath you shakes again, as another cannon's roar heralds the next chapter of Osaka's agony. The sky above Osaka Castle churns with thick grey smoke as the day stretches on. The sun hangs overhead like a pale disk behind shifting clouds of ash and powder, casting a wan light over the city's desperate defenders. You hurry through narrow corridors inside the keep, sandals slapping the wooden floors slick with grime and blood. Cries of wounded men echo from every corner, some muffled by tightly bound bandages, others sharp and ragged, filling the air with the unmistakable timbre of mortal fear. You skid around a corner and nearly collide with a group of samurai donning armor in the flickering light of torches. Their faces are set with grim determination, jaws clenched, eyes bright with the fervor of those who know this day might be their last. One man helps another tighten the cords of his cuirass, hands moving quickly despite the tremor in his fingers. Another checks his katana over and over, blade flashing in the gloom. Historians still argue whether the defenders' will to resist was stoked by loyalty to the Toyotomi clan or simple hatred of Tokugawa rule, but either way, it burns hot enough to keep these men standing. A horn sounds from the ramparts, followed by a frantic beating of drums. The signal. You race back to the outer walls, your legs burning, lungs roar with the acrid smoke that thickens with each passing hour. As you climb the battered stairway to the parapets, a gust of wind parts the smoke long enough to reveal the horrific panorama. Tokugawa infantry advancing in tight, disciplined lines, banners fluttering above them like dark birds. The ground between them and the castle is littered with bodies, broken spears, and splintered shields. You duck just in time as a musket ball cracks into the wall near your head, showering you with splinters of stone. You crawl to a firing slit and peer through it. Osaka's defenders loose arrows in coordinated waves, feathered missiles whistling through the air before burying themselves in the advancing lines. Some attackers crumple, others step over them without breaking stride. The air rings with screams, clash of steel, and the hiss of arrows, a storm of sound that rattles the teeth in your skull. A mainstream fact echoes in your mind as you nock an arrow. The Osaka campaign's final siege was among the bloodiest in Japan's Sengoku period, a culmination of decades of civil war that would decide the fate of an entire nation. Below you, the fate of every man, woman and child in the castle teeters on a blade's edge. As you rise to fire, an explosion rocks the southern wall. You glimpse a breach opening like a festering wound, dust and rubble cascading down as defenders are thrown aside like rag dolls. A cheer rises from the Tokugawa ranks, surging up the hill with a chilling fervor. Soldiers pour into the breach, only to be met by desperate defenders wielding naginata and spears in a brutal, frantic melee. You slide down the stairway to the courtyard, joining a line of peasants and ashigaru shoveling hot coals from braziers into clay pots. The plan is simple, if savage. When attackers breach the inner gates, you'll hurl burning embers at them, turning the narrow halls into hellish funnels of fire. The coals hiss and spit as you scoop them, heat searing your hands even through cloth. Sweat runs into your eyes as you work, but you dare not pause. Suddenly, a thunderous cheer from defenders rattles the walls. You look up to see a group of samurai charging through the breach, blades gleaming in the firelight as they clash with the invaders. For a heartbeat, hope surges in your chest. You scream yourself hoarse, along with everyone else, but the cry dies quickly as a fresh wave of Tokugawa soldiers pushes forward, overwhelming the defenders in a roiling tide of steel. A quirky tidbit flashes in your mind as you dash back to the ramparts with another basket of arrows. Some samurai believed dying with your eyes open ensured your spirit would haunt your killer. The thought gives you a dark, cold comfort as you reload your bow, fingers shaking from exhaustion and fear. Around you, the castle's great halls burn. Flames leap from roof beams, hungry tongues of orange and yellow that spit showers of embers into the sky. Smoke coils overhead in sinuous black columns, carrying the bitter scent of burning rice, straw, timber, and flesh. You cough violently, eyes streaming, ears ringing with the clash of blades and the shriek of the wounded. Men stagger past you with limbs wrapped in blood-soaked rags. Others limp along, eyes wide and unseeing. Somewhere in the smoke, you hear the desperate wails of women and children trying to escape the encroaching flames. Every breath tastes like soot, every heartbeat hammers like a funeral drum. And yet, you fight on. Every defender becomes a blur of motion, driven by terror and determination. The overseer's voice shreds the air as he barks orders, his words nearly lost in the cacophony of battle. You find yourself back on the parapet, loosing arrows with a grim rhythm, the bowstring cutting into your calloused fingers until each release sends fresh pain lancing up your arm. The sky overhead is a roiling black and orange maelstrom. The castle groans with each fresh impact of cannon fire. Osaka itself seems to cry out, its ancient stones splintering under the fury of Tokugawa's final assault. You glance at your katana, blade darkened with soot, and realize the day is slipping into a nightmare from which you may never wake. As the afternoon wanes, the castle's great keep smoulders under a sky bruised by roiling clouds of smoke. You stand panting in the courtyard, legs trembling, clothes stiff with soot and blood that may or may not be your own. Each breath rasps painfully in your throat. The air glows orange from flames devouring wooden buildings around you, transforming centuries-old structures into roaring pyres. Timbers crack like thunder as they collapse, sending waves of sparks dancing into the swirling ash above. The defenders' lines are fragmented, reduced to desperate knots of samurai rallying around burning gatehouses and crumbling walls. You join one such knot, a dozen warriors and a handful of ashigaru pressing together with grim resolve. Every face is a mask of exhaustion streaked with soot, eyes darting wildly at each distant shout or flash of steel. A mainstream fact cuts through the fog of your thoughts. Osaka Castle was considered Japan's strongest fortress, its defenses designed to repel any siege. But Tokugawa's cannons and relentless assaults have turned those proud walls into a labyrinth of rubble and fire. You swallow hard, gripping your bow, as you peer past a shattered barricade at shadows moving in the smoke. A Tokugawa banner emerges through the haze, its black field emblazoned with the hollyhock crest rippling in the hot wind. The sight makes your stomach lurch. Enemy foot soldiers, their armor dark as storm clouds, advance in cautious lines, stepping over bodies littering the ground. You hear the wet crunch of boots on broken tiles and the guttural orders barked from their commanders. You loose arrows until your quiver lies empty. Each shot feels heavier, your arms trembling with fatigue. One arrow buries itself in a Tokugawa ashigaru's shoulder. He staggers but keeps coming, driven by fear of his own commanders or the promise of victory. When your last arrow is gone, you draw your katana with shaking hands, the steel reflecting the inferno's light like a sliver of dying starlight. A fringe tidbit, you remember, from an old monk's tales flits across your mind. Some samurai carried small stones inscribed with prayers for a swift death. You wish you had one now. Historians still argue whether these talismans were acts of devotion or simply desperate superstitions, but as the enemy closes in, either seems a comfort. The clash is sudden and furious. Swords ring like temple bells, strikes coming faster than thought. A Tokugawa soldier lunges at you with a spear. You pivot, parrying with a shriek of steel on steel, then slash across his chest. He drops, but another steps over him, blade raised high. You dodge, your foot skidding through a slick of blood. Sparks fly as your katana meets his, hands jolting with each impact. The noise is deafening. Steel clanging, men grunting, flames roaring. The heat is monstrous, baking your face and arms even as cold fear floods your gut. Every sense is overloaded. The world shrinks to firelight, screaming, and the hot sting of near misses. A glancing blow tears your sleeve, drawing a thin line of blood along your bicep. Pain sharpens your focus. You shove the attacker back and whirl to face the next. Smoke stings your eyes so badly you can barely see. You fight by feel, instincts honed from months of tension exploding in this single brutal moment. An enemy swings wildly. You duck, driving your shoulder into his chest and sending him sprawling into a pile of burning beams. His scream rises above the din for a brief, piercing moment before fading under the crackle of flames. Around you, defenders fall one by one, pulled down by sheer numbers. Your ragged band shrinks to a handful of men pressed against a collapsed gate. Each time you glance to your side, you see fewer familiar faces. The old retainer you spoke with days before lies nearby, throat open to the bone, eyes frozen wide in disbelief. Your lungs burn with each breath, mouth dry as dust. Your muscles feel hollow, arms heavy as millstones. Yet you keep swinging, keep stepping, because to stop now is to die. Overhead, Osaka Castle's main tower shudders under fresh impacts. Its roof, already licked by fire, finally caves inward with a monstrous roar, sending flaming beams and a plume of sparks shooting skyward like a pyre built to reach the heavens. The ground heaves as the central keep collapses, a thunderous crash, shaking loose centuries of dust and memories. Flaming debris rains down, smashing statues, splintering gates, and crushing the last pockets of resistance. You stagger back from the heat, vision blurring. Through the swirling ash, you see Tokugawa soldiers raising their standards on the charred remains of Osaka's ramparts. The sight hits like a spear through your chest. The castle's fate is sealed. The battle is lost. Above the din, a Tokugawa horn sounds, rising cold and triumphant. Its notes slice through the screams and the crackling inferno, echoing across Osaka's broken courtyards. The castle, once the last beacon of the Toyotomi's defiance, burns like a fallen star, its bright heart consumed by the unyielding darkness of the rising Tokugawa order. The horn's echoes fade into the crackling roar of flames devouring Osaka Castle's timbers. You stumble backward from the ruined keep, feet crunching on broken roof tiles and splintered beams. Embers whirl in the air around you like angry fireflies, stinging your exposed skin. Each breath tastes of smoke and despair. Somewhere behind you, a child wails, a high, raw sound that cuts deeper than any blade, then is abruptly silenced by the crash of falling stone. The castle is no longer a fortress. It's a furnace, a labyrinth of collapsing halls and buckling gates. You press yourself against a stone wall, still cool enough not to burn your cheek, panting, ears ringing from the roar of the inferno and the ceaseless clash of steel. You see men fighting in twos and threes, backs to the flames, faces smeared black with soot and blood. Every parry and strike is desperate, wild, less the art of the sword and more the animal flailing of creatures who refuse to die quietly. The few defenders left try to rally, but their voices are lost beneath the howling of the wind that sweeps through shattered corridors, feeding the fires. One samurai, armor scorched and cracked, throws himself into a knot of advancing Tokugawa soldiers, blade whirling in a final, futile dance. He is swallowed by spears. Another retainer drags his wounded comrade toward the inner keep, only for both to vanish under falling beams as the ceiling caves in with a deafening crunch. A mainstream fact carves itself into your mind like a brand. After the siege's final assault, Osaka Castle's great halls were systematically set aflame by Tokugawa's forces to root out resistance and erase the Toyotomi's power once and for all. A fringe tidbit you remember, a rumor that even as the flames spread, some Toyotomi loyalists tried to hide treasures or secret scrolls in underground chambers. Historians still argue whether any of these hidden legacies survived the flames that consumed the last hope of Toyotomi rule. You stagger from your shelter as the heat becomes unbearable. Sparks hiss against your skin as you duck through a half-collapsed gate. The sky above is thick with churning black smoke, turning day into a hellish twilight. The castle grounds are littered with bodies, defenders and attackers both, sprawled in grotesque stillness, weapons fallen from lifeless hands. The air pulses with the hot stench of burning wood, charred flesh, and scorched rice straw. You scurry to a narrow stone bridge arching over a moat, now filled with floating debris and shattered arrows. The water below shimmers with the reflection of leaping flames, casting molten patterns across your tear-streaked face. As you cross, you pass civilians huddled in terrified knots. Old men clutching bamboo walking sticks, women with soot-smeared faces shielding infants, children clutching wooden dolls whose painted eyes seem to stare in horror at the scene unfolding around them. On the far side of the bridge, Tokugawa troops pour into the courtyard, their matchlocks slung, eyes sweeping for pockets of resistance. Some carry torches, setting fire to anything still standing. Others drag prisoners from hiding spots, binding hands roughly with hemp rope. Cries of surrender rise, pitiful and small against the roar of the inferno. You duck behind a toppled stone lantern as a squad passes, your heart pounding so hard you fear it will give you away. One Tokugawa soldier pauses inches from you, scanning the shadows. You hold your breath until your lungs scream, the sweat on your skin cold despite the heat. After a long moment, he moves on, boots crunching over shattered tiles. From your hiding spot, you see the great keep's central tower engulfed in towering flames, the final death knell of Osaka's defiance. A mighty timber beam, thicker than your body, creaks, splits, and crashes to the courtyard in a fountain of sparks. The sound is thunderous, a final punctuation that tells every soul in the city the battle is truly over. The horns of the Tokugawa armies blare again, not as a call to attack, but a victorious note rolling across the city's rooftops. Their banners rise above the shattered walls, dark crests stark against the churning orange sky. The banners ripple in the scorching wind, symbols of a new era clawed from the burning bones of the old. You see a line of prisoners, defenders, servants, even children, herded at spear point across the ruined courtyard, each face blank with shock. Some stumble, others clutch each other for strength. Above them, Tokugawa generals watch from horseback, armor gleaming dully in the firelight, eyes cold as obsidian. The dawn of their power is here, its birth cry the crackling of burning wood and the sobs of the defeated. Somewhere behind you, the last temple bell in the castle rings once, its note thin and clear through the chaos. It hangs in the air like a ghost of hope, before being drowned by the collapse of another tower. You bow your head, forehead touching the scorched stones, and whisper a prayer you no longer believe will be answered. The night is coming, and Osaka Castle is gone. Darkness begins to swallow the smouldering ruins as the last light fades from a sky turned the color of dried blood. You emerge from your hiding place behind the shattered lantern, body aching, throat raw from smoke, and limbs trembling with exhaustion. The Tokugawa banners flutter overhead in the night breeze, lit by the dying glow of the fires consuming Osaka Castle's once proud halls. Each crackle of flame punctuates the finality of defeat, a cruel drumbeat reminding you the old order has crumbled. You creep along a low wall, heart hammering in your chest, as Tokugawa soldiers secure every corner of the ruined fortress. They shout orders, douse smaller fires, and check corpses for signs of life. Here and there, you see prisoners herded into lines under torchlight, each face slack with despair. A mainstream fact you remember with bitter clarity. After the fall of Osaka, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, last hope of the Toyotomi line, was forced to commit seppuku alongside his mother, Yodo, Dono, ending his clan's challenge to Tokugawa power once and for all. As you slip from shadow to shadow, you catch glimpses of victorious Tokugawa samurai raising goblets of sake in triumph, eyes alight with the savage joy of conquest. Their black lacquered armor gleams with soot and blood. Even in celebration, they look like dark phantoms prowling the wreckage. You hear them laughing, the sound sharp and cold as icicles, echoing over the smouldering walls. Near a half-collapsed storehouse, you find a huddle of civilians, peasants, servants, and children, cowering together in the darkness. An old woman holds a baby tight to her chest, whispering broken prayers into its hair. A boy no older than 6 stares blankly into the flames, cheeks streaked with soot and tears. One mother shields her daughter with her own body as a pair of Tokugawa ashigaru stride by, boots crunching in the rubble. The soldiers barely spare them a glance. The defeated are no threat. You press forward, ducking low as you pass the ruins of the castle's outer halls. A pungent fog of burned rice, charred wood, and scorched silk hangs heavy in the air, clinging to your clothes and hair. You cough, tasting the bitter residue of the day's fury. Each breath feels like swallowing a mouthful of ash. A fringed tidbit surfaces unbidden. Some claimed that, in the final hours of the siege, desperate defenders tried to set fire to the Tokugawa siege lines with flaming carts. A last act of defiance historians still debate for lack of surviving records. Whether true or not, you think, it would hardly have stemmed the tide. You round a corner into a courtyard lit by dozens of torches. In the center, a raised platform bears a kneeling samurai, his armor battered but still bearing the Toyotomi crest. His head is bowed. 2 Tokugawa retainers flank him, swords drawn. The hush that hangs over the courtyard is absolute. Even the crackling fires seem to hold their breath. The executioner's blade flashes in the torchlight and arcs down in a silver blur. The head tumbles, thudding onto the stones as a spatter of dark blood marks the end of another loyalist. The onlookers do not cheer or jeer. They watch in stony silence, their victory already complete. You slip away before the soldiers can notice you, your footsteps crunching softly on shattered tiles. The great keep smoulders behind you, a black silhouette against the sullen night sky. Embers drift through the air like fireflies as Tokugawa men sweep the ruins for stragglers. Here and there, you hear the pained whinnies of horses injured in the day's fighting, their riders nowhere to be seen. You pass the main gate, now a twisted ruin of charred wood and cracked stone, its heavy doors lying in splinters. Beyond it, the city of Osaka stretches out, rooftops silhouetted against the horizon. Fires burn in the distance, marking places where Tokugawa troops have taken control or looters have already begun their work. Smoke coils up from the city streets like thin black snakes climbing to the heavens. Your legs carry you across the moat's narrow bridge, boots slipping on blood-slick stones. You pause halfway, glancing back one last time. The castle's skeletal remains loom above the outer walls, every timber still standing etched in flickering orange light. You feel an ache deeper than exhaustion. The end of an era, the death of a dream carried on Toyotomi banners for decades, gone in a single day's fury. You reach the far bank of the moat as the Tokugawa horns sound yet again, this time a slow, solemn note rolling across Osaka like a funeral song. It heralds not just victory, but the beginning of Tokugawa ascendancy, a shogunate that will shape Japan for over 2 centuries. The castle's defenders, once proud samurai and loyal retainers, now lie scattered or kneeling in the dirt, awaiting whatever judgment the new lords deem fit. You kneel too, in the shadows beyond the moat, forehead pressed to the cold earth. The flames of Osaka's last night flicker in your eyes as you whisper a prayer. For the dead, for the lost, and for yourself, stranded in a world remade by fire. All of a sudden, you wake sprawled across a patch of cold, dew-soaked grass in a neglected cemetery beyond Rome's ancient walls. The first light of dawn seeps into the sky, pale and shivering, washing over rows of tombstones leaning like old drunks after a feast. Each slab of marble or tufa bears Latin inscriptions, names, titles, pious boasts. Yet here and there, some stones have peculiar scars, thick gouges cut across letters, entire names chiseled into oblivion. You pull yourself upright, cloak damp and heavy, breath steaming as you exhale. The air is thick with the perfume of wilted laurel wreaths left by mourners who no longer dare to visit openly. Between cracked slabs, weeds snake upward like accusing fingers. A crow hops along a nearby headstone, tilting its head as it eyes you with dark curiosity. Among the tombs lie the dead of the Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite protectors who stood closer to emperors than any man dared. Their graves cluster like silent sentinels on the cemetery's eastern edge, marked by their distinctive crests and martial epitaphs. Valerius, defender of the princeps; Claudius, shield of the Senate. But many stones carry those harsh scars of erasure. Entire names and achievements, once proudly proclaimed, are now lost in deep, angry gouges. A mainstream fact you recall stirs uneasily inside you. The Praetorian Guard were both the emperor's shield and his dagger, known throughout the empire for making and unmaking rulers. Their power was a double-edged sword, feared as much by emperors as by Rome's enemies. You stumble forward, scanning the blank stones. A fringe tidbit echoes in your mind. Some whispered that stonemasons who carved out names at midnight were paid double to forget whose orders they obeyed. Historians still argue whether the systematic erasure of these names was driven by paranoid emperors or by rival factions within the Praetorians themselves. As dawn spreads, the cemetery comes to uneasy life. A thin mist coils around the tombs, drifting between the trees like ghostly robes. Far beyond the graveyard walls, you hear the city stir. Vendors setting up carts, soldiers changing shifts, a chorus of dogs barking from distant alleys. Yet here among the graves, silence reigns, heavy and oppressive. You kneel before a particularly grand monument, its columns cracked, its carved eagle wings chipped beyond recognition. The name on its central plaque has been hacked away with such violence that flakes of marble still litter the ground, sharp enough to cut your fingertips. You run a hand over the pitted surface, the cold stone biting into your skin as you trace letters that no longer exist. The erasure feels deliberate, spiteful, like a curse levelled from the living upon the dead. A breeze picks up, stirring your ragged cloak. The air tastes of earth, old stone, and something bitter you can't name. Above you, crows gather on the branches of a dying cypress, their cawing harsh as the names that once adorned these graves. You imagine their calls carrying secrets across the rooftops, each croak a reminder of plots that ended in sudden death. You pass rows of simpler tombstones, where inscriptions remain intact, the epitaphs boasting of loyalty and valor. But the contrast makes the blank stones more sinister. Each erased name a phantom of betrayal, each scar a reminder that someone powerful decided to purge a life not only from the world, but from memory itself. You crouch low as you hear the scuff of leather sandals in the mist. A hunched figure emerges, wrapped in a hooded cloak. In his hands glints a hammer and chisel. He pauses at a tomb, raises his tools, and begins tapping, each blow crisp, deliberate, echoing like muted thunder through the cold morning air. You freeze, watching the stonemason scrape away another name, his movements careful, eyes darting over his shoulder as if even the dead might tattle. Somewhere far off, a temple bell tolls, the deep sound rolling across the city's waking streets. The chisel's rhythm pauses at each peal before resuming, a grim dance of steel on stone. Every fresh gouge draws a flurry of marble dust that floats on the dawn's first light like funeral ash. You know each erased name once belonged to a man who thought himself untouchable behind his plumed helmet and silver breastplate. As the mason moves on, you stand among the tombs, hands tucked under your cloak. The mist thickens, turning the graveyard into a warren of white silence. Somewhere beyond the walls, the city's clamour grows louder, but here in this field of forgotten names, time feels frozen, breathless. You whisper a prayer, not for the nameless dead, but for yourself. Because if the men who stood closest to emperors could be erased so completely, what hope does anyone have of being remembered? The morning brightens slowly, but the sun's weak light only reveals more scars across the cemetery. You weave between leaning headstones as the mist begins to lift in tattered veils, exposing details you wish you hadn't seen. Fresh gouges on once, pristine marble, newer than others, the cuts sharp-edged and white as fresh bone. You realize with a shiver that the erasures didn't all happen years ago. Some names were scraped away in the dark just last night. You crouch by a stone marked only by a blank rectangle, where a name once proudly proclaimed the achievements of its owner. Around its edges, words remain: valiant service, unshakable loyalty. The glowing praise sits awkwardly now, praising no one, floating like a compliment to a ghost. You imagine how it felt for the family, once placing flowers or offerings here, and now coming to see the name gone, as if their son or husband never existed. A brittle wind rattles dry laurel leaves across the stones. Farther along the rows, you spot another figure wrapped in a charcoal cloak, face hidden by the cowl. He stands by a cracked monument, chisel in one hand, hammer dangling at his side. He isn't working now. Instead, he studies the stone as if gathering the nerve to begin. When he does, he raises the chisel, draws it across the first letter, and taps. The sharp, metallic ring slices the quiet like a knife. Marble chips flicker in the cold air. The sound triggers a memory of hushed rumours from your youth. Tavern talk after dark, men leaning in close, breath heavy with sour wine. How Praetorians who chose the wrong side of an imperial power struggle often vanished without trial, their names scraped from records, their property seized by the victor. A mainstream fact you recall with a bitter twist. The Praetorian Guard's history is littered with sudden assassinations and coups, their loyalty shifting like reeds in the wind if it meant survival. The mason's work grows faster. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike removes more of the letters. You can't see his face, but his hands tremble with either fear or urgency. Dust hangs around him like a private cloud. He stops only when the name is gone, replaced by a raw scar of white stone, then lowers his tools and looks around, shoulders hunched. You hold your breath, willing yourself to remain unseen. His eyes flick past you before he melts into the shadows, leaving behind the hollow silence of the nameless dead. As you rise, your boots crunch on stray shards of marble, the sound loud in the hush. You slip between rows of tombstones, following the path of fresh dust, leading to more erased epitaphs. Overhead, crows, wheel and caw, black wings stark against the pale sky. They settle on stones with names still intact, claws scraping as they hop from one to the next. Their calls sound like laughter at your discomfort, A fringe tidbit surfaces from a conversation you overheard near the Forum. In the reign of Emperor Caligula, entire regiments of Praetorians were dismissed or executed when their loyalty came into question, and in some cases, stones were left blank intentionally to show the world these men had fallen from grace. Historians still argue whether these purges were purely political or motivated by deeper paranoia. You drift toward the older part of the graveyard, where moss carpets the tombs and ivy strangles broken pillars. Here, erosion has softened inscriptions. Names are nearly illegible, stories faded by time instead of malice. Yet the scars of erasure still stand out. Deep, angry slashes that cut cleaner than any weathering. Letters violently obliterated as if to prove betrayal echoes even into death. You kneel by a grave with half an inscription left. Son of Praetorian. The rest is gouged into white dust. Between the remaining words, you imagine what might have been. Vows of loyalty sworn in the barracks. The thrill of guarding emperors during triumphs. The dread of being watched by your own comrades. You try to picture his face, his voice, but the blankness of the stone defeats you. It's as though the chisel carved out his very soul. The wind picks up again, bending thin cypress trees that line the graveyard's crumbling wall. You shiver in your cloak as it snaps like a sail, stirring memories of whispered tales about the Praetorians' infamous power, how they sold the throne itself more than once, auctioning the empire's future in the chaos after an emperor's death. You wonder how many erased names you see here belong to those who bet on the wrong heir, or who knew too much at the wrong moment. Through the thin mist rising anew, you catch movement at the graveyard's far edge. 2 soldiers in crested helmets, glinting bronze catching the light. They patrol the perimeter, eyes sharp, hands resting on their sword hilts. You press yourself behind a toppled column as they pass, the gravel crunching under their boots. One mutters to the other that new orders came from the palace last night. More names to be erased by dawn. You strain to hear, but the wind snatches the rest. Your pulse hammers in your ears as you slip deeper into the graveyard's shadows, heart heavy with the knowledge that betrayal here doesn't end at death. Even a tomb offers no refuge from imperial paranoia. You pause at a cracked archway, marking the oldest section of the cemetery. A crow croaks overhead. The headstones are fewer here, and the silence deeper. But among the ancient stones you still see fresh scars. Proof that even the oldest memories can be rewritten with a few careful strikes of hammer and chisel. And standing in that hollow hush, you realize how the cemetery itself has become a silent testament to the Praetorian Guard's shifting loyalties and the Emperor's ruthless determination to control not only the living, but the stories told about the dead. The evening light fades to a cold, washed-out grey, shadows stretching long across the rows of leaning tombstones. You press onward, deeper into the heart of the graveyard, stepping over cracked slabs and mossy roots as the air cools and the first night insects begin to sing. The quiet is thick, the kind that muffles your footsteps and makes your own breathing sound too loud. Somewhere overhead, an owl hoots softly, the only witness to your solitary vigil among the erased. You find yourself before a row of headstones aligned like silent soldiers on parade. Their inscriptions are ornate, carved with elaborate wreaths and swirling motifs, but each name has been meticulously destroyed. A mainstream fact rises unbidden. After the death of Emperor Domitian, his memory was officially condemned in a practice called damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, a punishment not only for emperors, but sometimes inflicted upon powerful guards who crossed the wrong man at the wrong time. You squat beside a stone where even the dates of birth and death have been scraped away, leaving only a hollow dedication to the brave without an identity. The gouges look almost fresh. You imagine the chisel biting in like a viper, each blow a sentence, each stroke an execution of reputation. Your fingers hover over the raw cuts, afraid to touch, as if they might burn your skin. A fringe rumour flickers through your memory. Some claimed Praetorian names were erased not only for betrayal, but to hide deep imperial secrets. Affairs with empresses, murders disguised as accidents, or thefts of imperial treasures. Historians still argue whether these blank stones were the empire's way of smothering scandals, or simply reminders that absolute power erases whomever it must. From beyond the cemetery walls comes the distant din of Rome settling into night, the rattle of cartwheels, the yips of street dogs, the last shouts of vendors hawking wine or honeyed dates. Yet here, the silence is unbroken but for the faint rustle of laurel leaves whispering to one another in the evening breeze. You rise, eyes drawn to the shadows creeping through the cemetery's tangled cypresses. Lanterns appear in the distance, guards making their rounds. Their bobbing lights send shifting patterns across the stones, dancing over blank spaces where names once stood. You slip behind a toppled sarcophagus, heart pounding, as the guards' muffled conversation drifts past. Talk of fresh purges, new orders from the palace, whispers of senators scheming to control the Praetorians before the Praetorians control them. When their footsteps fade, you crawl out and find yourself facing the oldest monument in the graveyard, an imposing stone stele crowned with a half-shattered eagle. The words here are faint but mostly intact, recounting the deeds of men who guarded emperors long dead, whose loyalty, real or forced, has somehow escaped the chisel's wrath. Around these names, the air feels heavier, thick with the weight of history and secrets too ancient to threaten anyone anymore. You bow low before these surviving names, lips brushing the cold marble in a silent gesture of respect. You whisper to the stone. Perhaps they were lucky to have died before their loyalty became inconvenient. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of damp earth and crushed grass, along with a faint, bitter undertone of old blood. The stars begin to prick the darkening sky above, cold points of light watching your lonely path among the graves. Each step feels louder now, echoing in the hush, as though the cemetery itself holds its breath, waiting for another name to fall to the chisel. You pass another stone mid-erasure, its letters partly visible. Eius Prate, a name snatched from the brink of oblivion yet caught mid-purge. You imagine a mason called away before finishing the task. What happened to him, you wonder? Did he flee? Or did the same blade that threatened the dead find him first? A shiver runs through you as an owl glides silently overhead, wings wide and pale in the starlight. It lands on a headstone, eyes gleaming as it surveys the graveyard. For a moment, you envy its indifference. The owl knows nothing of betrayal or purges, only hunger and survival. You skirt a fresh grave, the mound of disturbed earth still moist, a spade left leaning nearby. Your breath catches. Was this the resting place of a newly fallen Praetorian? Did his erasure come before or after the blade? You move on quickly, feet slipping in the loose soil, afraid of what lingers in the dark. A lone lantern burns near the cemetery gate. You creep closer, eyes fixed on its flickering light, hoping for an escape from the oppressive quiet. But as you near the exit, you pause and look back over your shoulder. The blank stones loom behind you, pale ghosts in the moonlight, each one a silent testament that here, in the heart of empire, memory is as fragile and as easily destroyed as flesh. You step past the last row of tombstones, boots brushing fallen laurel leaves that crunch softly in the cold night air. Beyond the cemetery gate, the outskirts of Rome stretch under a velvet sky studded with indifferent stars. But before leaving, you pause, drawn back by a final, irresistible urge to glance once more at the blank stones that stand like silent judges. A thin mist drifts among them, curling around eroded epitaphs and pooling in hollows, as if the earth itself exhaled secrets it couldn't keep buried. Your gaze lingers on one particularly large slab leaning slightly to one side, its face scored with violent lines where a name once commanded respect. Nearby, a fresh bouquet of wilted flowers lies trampled into the dirt, petals torn and dark with dew. Someone came to mourn here, you realize. Someone who remembered the erased, even when the empire demanded forgetfulness. The sight tugs at your chest like a phantom pain. You drift along the wall one last time, hand brushing cool stone as your eyes search for surviving names, as though finding just one intact could reassure you that memory might triumph. But again and again, your fingers find scars. Smooth marble, abruptly jagged, words ending mid-syllable, dates with the final digits ground away. Each gap in the inscriptions feels like a pit you could fall into, swallowed by the knowledge that power carves not just the future, but the past. A mainstream fact drifts through your mind. After each successful coup, Praetorian guard captains would often order the immediate execution of rival officers, their names purged from military rolls and public monuments to erase even the thought of dissent. A fringe rumour you once overheard at the forum flickers too. Some erasures were paid for by surviving family members themselves, desperate to disassociate from the condemned, hoping anonymity would protect them from the same fate. Historians still argue whether these acts were cowardice or wisdom, but here among the headstones the question feels cruelly unanswerable. You step carefully over a toppled slab split like a cracked tooth. Crows perched atop it, shifting restlessly as they watch you. Their eyes gleam with knowing darkness. Their claws click against stone, the sound like tiny chisels in the hush. You wonder if they remember faces that no one else does, or if they too forget as soon as the body cools. Somewhere beyond the cemetery, Rome's lights glimmer across hills and domes, an expanse of warm lanterns and torchlight that feels unreal from this cold, silent field. Bells toll faintly from a distant church, their iron voices drifting over the walls like a dirge. Between peals you catch whispers of the city waking to rumours of who fell overnight. A senator found face, down in a fountain, a merchant's house ransacked, a guardsman vanished on his evening patrol. Near the cemetery entrance, you spot a fresh tool mark on a stone barely 2 days old. The gouge is still white against the grey face, dust not yet washed away by rain. You crouch beside it, running your fingers through the marble powder, feeling the rawness of a name freshly unmade. A sense of finality settles on you, heavy as a tomb lid. These stones are not just graves, but weapons wielded in silence, each erasure a blade cutting backwards through time. The wind picks up, rustling laurel and olive branches overhead. The mist begins to thin, revealing the full sweep of the graveyard. Hundreds of stones stretching into darkness, some gleaming with untouched inscriptions, many more scarred into anonymity. A shudder runs through you. You pull your cloak tighter and breathe deep of the damp, mineral-scented air. You turn at last, footsteps slow as you leave the necropolis behind. The blank stones recede into the night like ghostly teeth, but you know they will remain, waiting for the next hammer and chisel to strike. Even now, names are being whispered in the halls of power, names of friends, rivals, perhaps your own, and you understand that in Rome, nothing is eternal except the fear of being forgotten. You step through the crumbling archway of the cemetery gate, the world beyond suddenly alive with distant music, dogs barking, the hum of life moving on as if nothing happened. But you know better. Behind you, among the mist and the crows, Rome's truest history lies hidden in the silence of erased names, a graveyard of memories carefully carved away. You have travelled through dawn-lit sands, burning castles, and fog-shrouded tombs. With each step, your breath has slowed, your shoulders softened, and your mind settled into a quieter place. Feel the weight of the night lifting from your chest, the final images of ancient stones and silent winds dissolving like morning mist under a rising sun. Let your thoughts drift as you sink deeper into stillness, each inhale longer, each exhale softer, carrying you beyond the reach of worry. Know that, here in the hush of your resting place, you are safe. The stories are behind you, their echoes fading, leaving only the steady rhythm of your breath. Rest now, and let sleep find you in the gentle cradle of the night. Sweet dreams, wanderer of stories.